Okay, yeah, I went to grab my charger and then I came back and recorded the rest of the video. And while editing the video today, I found out that the audio for that whole second half after I grabbed my charger got corrupted. Just the voice sounded extremely laggy, so I'm doing this again now. Anyways, what I want to show you guys next is how to do all of this stuff using XLOOKUP. And this is a point in the workshop where everything that happens from now on is optional and for your own learning. You don't have to do any of this if you know HLOOKUP. So, how much does an orange cost? To do an XLOOKUP, as we covered in workshop 3, we need three things. Our reference, which is the orange, the row or column where our reference is on, because XLOOKUP goes vertical or horizontal, and the row, in our case, that has the value we're looking for, which is the price. And then we get the price. How much does a pair cost? So for a pair, we do the same exact thing. XLOOKUP, we click on the pair, and then the row that contains the pair, and then the row which is going to display the value in front of that pair. And there we go. So how much does a watermelon weigh? Very simple. We type XLOOKUP. And again, three things. Our reference, the row where we can find the reference, and then the row in front of that that has the value we're looking for. And this is the point where I should mention I've been using pounds. It should be grams because the watermelon is not 1,500 pounds. And then our mangoes in season. So we can type XLOOKUP, click on a reference, the mango, select the row that has that, and then the row that tells us whether or not it's in season. And it can find that, okay, this is what we're looking for. Find the value in front of it here. It says no, so it's not in season. Now we're going to find the summer sales starting from June. We're going to say XLOOKUP. We're going to click on our reference, which is June, and the row that contains that. And then from there, we're going to select the row that has the unit sold. And since we have the same reference, I mean, we could drag this down, but it's not going to work. And the reason for this is every time we drag this down, our selected rows also are dragged down. So we know for a fact that our reference is always going to be at the top. So when we look at the row in which we find our reference, we're going to log that. And you only need to log the row. You don't have to log the column. So you only need to log the number in this case. But I'm logging both. And also, as we drag it down, the blue one also gets dragged down. So we move on to target units and attainment, but it's only asking for sales. So essentially, we want to stick to these two rows. We just want to change which month we're looking at. So we're going to log the row that gives us the sales also, because that's the only thing we're looking for. And now when we drag it, it's going to work. Now for summer attainment, same thing. So we're going to say XLOOKUP. And our lookup value or our reference is going to be June, comma. We find that value in this row right here, the top row. And the attainment is going to be this row right here. And we do everything by clicking and dragging for XLOOKUP. It's a lot more dynamic. And if we try to drag this down, we're going to have the same problem. So instead of the month, we're going to select the unit sold, and then it moves on to like the empty cell for the blue one. We don't want that. We want to stick to the months and the unit sold. So let's lock the row for months. And then let's lock the row for units sold. And now we're being asked if we can meet our goals. Now, this is when XLOOKUP becomes kind of a pain. So when we're looking for an exact match, which we have been so far, XLOOKUP is way easier and faster than V and HLOOKUP. But when we get to true questions, it becomes a little bit more of a pain. And I'm going to show you how. So I'm going to just visualize a comparison here. Just go through VLOOKUP. And then we have reference for all of them, table for these two, or reference row or column for this one. And then column number for VLOOKUP, and then row number for HLOOKUP. And for XLOOKUP, we have turn row or column. And then 0 or 1, 0 or 1. Now, we can do true or false in XLOOKUP. Just two things you need to keep in mind before you do that. These are the only three necessary things, like the mandatory things for XLOOKUP. If you go into the optional things, before you do anything else, you have to give it an error message. So this is going to be the message that pops up if your XLOOKUP cannot find a value. So it could be NA or RIP. This is what you choose to display if the formula doesn't work. Once you get that out of the way, now you can put true or false. But also true or false works slightly different for XLOOKUP. So 0 is false, of course, but then true has two possible values. It could be 1 or it could be -1. And let me show you why. So there's these grades, right? There's 80, 90, and let's say we have our grades like 82 or 84, or this could be an 87 also, it doesn't matter. It falls within the range of 80 to 90, right? And then 80 is a B, and then 90 is a A. So with V or H lookup, if you put true, it's going to give you something within the range every time, right? So basically what X lookup does for approximate match questions is if your number falls between the two listed numbers on the table, so like 80 or 90, let's say, it makes you choose whether you want to jump to the next higher closest number or stick with the previous or lower closest number. Because we fall within that range of a B is 80 to 90, we're always going to stick with a lower one. So we're always going to say at 80, even with our current example, right? So 70 to 90 is at risk. And once you hit 90, you become close. Let me show you guys an example. So equal sign, X lookup. We choose our reference. We choose the row our reference is in. And then we choose the row that contains the data we want to get back. And then value, if not found here, we're going to say RIP. And then we're not going to do this in the actual workshop. You guys are going to type NA or something. I'm just using this as an example. And if we type 1, it's going to give us exceeded. We look at the table, it says at 100% the goal is met. At 120%, it's been exceeded. But why does it say exceeded? Because for XLOOKUP and XLOOKUP alone, if your number is between these two, you have to choose which one you want to associate it with. So if you type 1, it's going to jump to the next checkpoint. And if you say -1, it's going to stick to the previous checkpoint. Obviously, because our number falls within the range of 100 to 120, we're always going to say -1 because we want to stay in that checkpoint. You know, I know it's kind of a pain to remember these slight variations in these formulas. Basically, my suggestion, if you have a false or exact match question, use whatever you're most comfortable with. They're all easy. If you have an approximate match question, I'd say learning VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP is easier. But if you, for some reason, choose to do XLOOKUP for an approximate match question, you're going to add 2 more steps, which is an error message, which you just need to do to get it out of the way. And then you're going to say -1 instead of 1, unlike the other two. So the only thing that changes for XLOOKUP is you add the error message, and instead of 1 for true questions, you say -1. If it's a false question, it's a 0 still. That is literally it. But anyways, we're here, so we got our reference and we got our lookup array. So this is not going to change. We want this row to stay the same across these formulas. And we want this to stay the same too. And we're going to type -1 for this. So now we know that we met our goals. We're staying within that range by rounding down to the previous checkpoint. That's just kind of what you have to do if you choose to do it this way. Now, last thing, this is going to be completely optional. I am not putting it on the exam. However, I want you guys to know this because I think it would be cool for you to know. And it might be very helpful in your jobs too. What we want to do here is basically make a bunch of dynamic drop-down lists. And we're going to use index and match to do this. And let me show you why. Let's start by filling this data first. We have this data set with an empty full name column, which, I mean, we have the first and last name, so we can do a concatenate. Put a space, and then choose the last name. And then we autofill. So the first thing that we have here, right, is the employee ID, which it's asking us to get this through data validation. So let's go back to data and click on data validation. We want a list of the employee IDs. And the source is going to be all of these IDs right here. Those are our options, right? And now we can choose any of these employees. I'm going to choose Katie Kardashian. I did not make this, by the way. This was Ariana last year. I would never do this. So what we want here, right, is a field that gives us the full name of whatever employee ID is selected. And we're going to do this using index and match. Super quick, what index and match do is basically two opposite things that intersect really nicely. And we also know for a fact that we cannot use VLOOKUP or anything here because VLOOKUP, your reference has to be at the very left of its own table. For this table, our reference is at the very right. So we cannot use VLOOKUP in all cases. And that's why we use index and match, right? So let's look at what index does. So index, then it asks for two mandatory things. So that is the array or our selection, our list of people, and then row number. Well, what does it want row number for? Let's give it row number 2. It gives you basically within this selection that you made, the value on the row that you mentioned. So index works a little something like this. You give it a list and then you give it a row number. And based on those two things, the point where they cross is the value that it's going to display. So this orange is what it displays. We have lookup value, lookup array, and match type. So let's say we want to do the IDs, right? So let's click on this ID right here. And within this list of IDs, and it also asks us for a type of match, for which we're going to say exact match. Basically, it tells us which row or what position it is within that list that we gave it. So this ID that I specified is in the second row. So match gives us back a row number, and index uses whatever row number we give it to read out a cell. And that's why we use them in combination. So we're going to say index. For the first half of this formula, we're going to use the array of names that it's going to read from. And instead of giving it one number, we're actually going to put a match formula here. And for now, let's forget everything that's happening outside of this. We want to find the name that is associated with this ID. So the one in front of this row right here. So for the match formula, we can take our reference, comma, and the lookup array that reference is in. And we want an exact match. We want to know exactly what its position is. So this match formula is going to tell us that our ID within the selection right here is in the second row. And that number 2 that the match is going to produce is going to be the number 2 that the index uses to display the name in front of it, because they are both working within the same row. So basically, match tells us what row this ID is in, and index will read out the name that's in front of that same row. Okay, now let's do the same thing for department. I'm going to say equals index. We want to read out the department name. So we're going to select that. And then for row number, let's see what the match gives us. So let's say match. We're going to use this as a reference, employee ID. And then we're going to select that column, find its position as an exact match. And then once we get that number, the index is going to read it and spell out the department name. And I forgot my second closing parenthesis. So I guess I'm in HR. First thing, if we change the employee ID, these two are automatically going to follow. As you guys can see, now we have a very dynamic table here. But if we want to make it even more dynamic, one thing we can do is take the department and then display the full names of everybody in that department. So for department, I mean, a very easy thing we can do, if we wanted to change together with this ID, we know that this will change this and this. And this department right here is exactly the same thing as this department right here. So basically, we can just set this cell equal to this cell. And we get accounting. So every time we change this now, this cell here is also going to change because it's always going to match this one. And last thing we're going to do is a filter function, display the full names of everybody in this department. So how do we do this? We're going to say equal sign filter. And it gives us two things, right? So the array of values we can display from, or everything we're putting into the filter, and then include, which is basically the condition. So which of these things are we going to show? Well, for the things that we're putting in the filter, we want to see the full names of everybody that's in this department. So we're going to select the full names, comma, and then include which of these full names are we going to mention? Well, as long as their department matches whatever department shows up here, right? So we're going to do select everything here, all the departments, and set that equal to whatever department we have present. So essentially, this is saying, this is our department. Take a look at all the values here that share that and display everybody's name that's associated with that. And we can see that in R&D, we have Zainab, Oscar, and Arjun. If we change the employee ID, we get somebody else's name and then their department, and then we get the names of everybody else who's also in that department. Pretty cool stuff. Anyways, this is entirely optional for you to learn. You don't have to. As far as the exam goes, guys, as long as you can do V and H lookup, approximate and exact questions, and then also you can do some X lookup exact match questions, you're going to be fine. Don't stress out over the approximate match X lookup questions. And definitely don't stress out about any of this because I'm not putting these on the exam. Anyways, that's pretty much it for now. Good luck with studying this stuff and enjoy.